everybody, and welcome back to Season 5 of the SFEMA Council podcast. My name is Madeline Grossi, and I'm again one of your co-hosts for this season, as well as the podcast administrator. Joining me on the hosting side today, we're super excited to have Alyssa. She's one of our first-year reps for this year on the SFEMA Council podcast, and she's going to be joining us on the social media side of things. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our guest for today, David Stark. David is a SFEMA grad from 2019, a former Brock SFEMA Council president and Senate member of the Brock University Students Union. In his professional life, David is the founder of the host of the Athletes podcast and co-founder of Cookstart Management. Currently, David works for Expert VR as the head of sales, and we welcome him today as our fourth guest here on Season 5 of the SFEMA Council podcast.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you, Madeline. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be chatting with both you and Sierra today. I've been following the SFEMA Council pod, obviously in the space, and it's great to see how it's grown over the past couple of years. Starting off with Will Ord, I believe, right? Who kicked it off?
Yeah.
There we go. Good stuff. Shout out to him for getting it going. I'm kicking myself for not starting it when I was around.
Oh yeah, he'll appreciate that for sure. He lived and breathed this thing, so. Well, we'll get right into it. So could you tell us a little bit about your path upon graduation here at Brock and where that has led you to right now?
Absolutely. In second year, I had the fortune of meeting Rob Cheevers, who's a part-time professor at Brock currently, I believe, who introduced me to the not-for-profit world, where I joined the Buffalo Canoe Club, did my internship in fourth year at the BCC, did some work with the Canada Summer Games Council, and that was where I ended up after graduation. I worked at the Buffalo Canoe Club for 3.5, 4 years, was exposed to a ton of world-class sailors, the event side of things, junior activities, running day camps between sailing, tennis, swimming, sailing lessons, and also getting the exposure of club experience, what it was like for club management, managing a P&L, managing a staff of 15 to 20 individuals, some of who were older, younger than myself, had way more experience, were teachers in the space. So I was fortunate enough to spend time there, learn from a guy like Rob, who had gone through, had a ton of life experience. I was able to pick his brain. And I was fortunate enough to turn that into, an opportunity where it was a seasonal job, and the winters were a little slower at the Buffalo Canoe Club and not as much sailing going on as the ice freezes over Lake Erie. So I was able to start up a passion project, which was the Athletes podcast, and always had a desire to stay within the sports space. After graduating, I was like, how the heck am I going to continue on in sport, stay involved in some capacity? Gary Vaynerchuk was preaching podcasts at the time, and I thought it was a fantastic opportunity to continue learning about the sports athletics world, and then expand my network, build communication skills like you two are doing right now here today, and really wanted to continue spreading the knowledge that I had acquired from Brock's sport management program, and really thought that this was a unique opportunity to meet new people, travel the world. Ultimately, after COVID, our first 30 episodes were in person in the Niagara region. Then in 2020, whatever it was, March, I believe, the COVID-19 scare came into effect, and we were able to go global with the podcast, frankly. And, we had access to everyone and anyone because they were sitting at home. So we started reaching out, having conversations with NFL, NBA, NHL players, to now featuring Olympians, world-class athletes, the best, pickleball, racquetball players in the world, you name it. We've probably chatted with them. And 4 years in, the podcast continues to grow. We're almost at 200 episodes. And it's funny because I finished up at the Buffalo Canoe Club, just did the podcast for a bit, got into fintech, worked for ClearCo, which was Michelle Romano from Dragon's Den. Her company was ranked like the #1 startup on LinkedIn. So that was kind of cool. to be able to say. Looked good on LinkedIn anyways, put it that way. And spent a year and a half there. And then realized that I really wanted to continue impacting an industry that I had a passion for, which was, the firefighting and police space. My father was a firefighter for 28 years. Grandfather was in the RCMP for 32 years. And two of the co-founders of Expert VR, Drew McNeil and Evan Sittler Bates, had founded Expert VR back in the Brock University days from the BioLink incubator. And we had conversations as students about joining the organization, doing sales for them. Wasn't right at the time. Fast forward 5 years, joined the company in January of 2023, and we're 9 months in now, really making an impact on those two industries and ultimately all first responders. And obviously they were impacted during COVID heavily, and I felt, compelled to put my stamp on that and hopefully help out the next generation of first responders, as well as educate, entertain, and inspire the next generation of athletes.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, because one of the things I've been taught most since I joined the SPIMA program was you can really do anything with this degree. A lot, like everything you're going to learn is super transferable, and I think that's important for students to hear, especially from someone like you who graduated recently, or like within the last few years here, to know that if things, like if you want to go down a different path, if you change your mind, that's totally cool. Like the sport industry is always going to be here for you, but if you have some other passions and you want to do some other stuff, that road is always open. So I think that's a super important lesson for students to know, is that there's always going to be more than one option for you, and you're not really confined to just the sport industry by taking the sport management program.
100%. The SPIMA program is ultimately a business program through a sport lens.
Yeah.
And it's just giving you a way to apply that business knowledge, information into something that's a little bit more interesting than maybe doing a stereotypical Coca-Cola or Pepsi breakdown. Now you're breaking down the Toronto Maple Leafs or Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, right? It's making it more digestible information.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, being so new to the program too, like even like I've only been going to class for a few months, but like I've already been told that too. Like this degree will literally, you can go do whatever you want with it, really, because it's really, like you said, just like a business degree through a sports lens, which I think is really cool, and it's like really different.
100%.
All right, so jump into question 2 here. So we mentioned the Athletes podcast. Do you want to explain like what kind of guests and conversations you have over there?
Yeah. So the goal, our overarching mission is to educate, entertain, and inspire the next generation of athletes. That's obviously progressed, changed, iterated over the past 4 years. Starting off having conversations with individuals like Chris Critelli, who people in the Niagara region will know the name, two-time NCAA champion, two-time U Sports champion. Now I guess it's called I can't remember what it used to be called. Anyway, going through that experience of graduating from SPIMA, realize that hey, there isn't a show or a podcast out there like this in the space that's getting the insights, knowledge, wisdom, stories from these athletes, and sharing it with the world. It was something that I wish I had access to growing up as an athlete. I felt like I would have sat and listened to conversations with NFL, NBA, NHL, Olympians, world-class medalists. Like there was a real lack of that in the space. Ever since that, there's been a lot that's come out, and places like SportsCenter and ESPN will do big hit pieces, but they won't necessarily shine light on sports that aren't as well put forward in the media, we'll say.
Yeah.
We'll even use women's sports for an example. What is it? 4% of media, maybe 2% of media goes towards women's sports right now. And, that's something that is just insane in my opinion, and something we're trying to change with Cook Stark management. And the fact of the matter is, like, we should be highlighting female athletes just as much as we are male athletes, right? And sports like CrossFit have done a good job of trying to equalize that playing field and showcase more of both sexes, but it's something that still to this day, the numbers speak for themselves as far as the retention. There's tons of interest in women and female sports. So it's really just putting the media dollars behind it now. And, ultimately we've created a platform now that people are consuming content from, and we want to make sure that it's a 1-to-1 ratio of female to male athletes that are being broadcasted on the show, and that women growing up see that there's an opportunity to do incredible things. And if they do those amazing things, that they'll be featured on something like that, and they'll be able to tell their story, their come ups, the pros, the cons, the highlights, lowlights, everything in between. Because that's the other thing I wanted to highlight. And I think I learned through SPIMA was that pro sport isn't necessarily all sunshine and rainbows 24/7, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it might look like it when they're on the ice or when they're on the field running around, and that, they're getting to be able to sign autographs and whatever the case may be. But, I just finished watching the David Beckham documentary, and there's a lot of lowlights that come from being in the spotlight all the time. And there's a lot of pressure around you. And there's a lot of family issues that come from always having to be on 24/7. You can't travel the same. You're dealt with what seems like incredible cards, and it seems like an amazing opportunity to be a world-class athlete and traveling around the world. But, that's not necessarily always the case, and wasn't also necessarily the case talking about mental health and where people are at in those situations. And obviously that's made strides over the past couple of years, probably decade even for that matter, but there's still a long way for that to go. And I think the Athletes Podcast is a platform that we're trying to showcase these incredible individuals, these high performance individuals, doctors, nutritionists, coaches, anyone in the fitness, health, wellness space that can help athletes become better, maybe help coaches get a little bit better, have parents realize the impact that they can have on their kids, make sure that they're doing a better job. All of this is kind of encapsulated, and it's maybe made it a slower growing podcast over the years because I haven't hit on one specific niche, but I'm confident like in the long run that, when people realize our mission and what we're trying to achieve, that there's a real benefit to what we've been putting out there over the past 4 years.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of really good points there. My heart smiled when you mentioned CrossFit, because I've done CrossFit for the last few years at home, and I've always liked the CrossFit Games are one of my most favorite events throughout the year. I've yet to go as a spectator or a volunteer, but I think that would be one of the coolest experiences ever. But I think they too have done a really good job of highlighting female athletes, and personally I find it more interesting to watch the female side of that sport because they're beasts. Like it's so interesting to watch. But another good point there you made, and I know you were at the PWHL inaugural draft as well, and I was there as a volunteer, but that was like a pretty remarkable day, and we talked about this. Our first episode this year was with Burton Lee, who's part of the PWHL this year. But that was a huge step in women's sports, and for everybody watching that day, for them to finally understand that, like, why didn't we have this earlier? Why are we just having it in 2023? So I totally agree with you, and I think all athletes should have their own space to share their voice and to showcase their ability. So super good points there for sure. Yeah.
No, you hit it spot on. Like, first off, some beasts to mention in the CrossFit space. Meredith Root, Alex Parker, we've had him on the podcast. Two incredible individuals with Tactic Nutrition. They put out incredible content speaking to, like, female empowerment and how there should be that equality put out there. And like I said, CrossFit's done a really good job of doing that. We just featured Rebecca Fusilier on the show as well. She's a 3-time CrossFit Games competitor, and that sport's one that is continuing to have to work through some growing pains, but once it gets additional money behind it, that one's going to be off to the races more than it already is. But that PWHL draft, Madeline, I'm so glad you had the opportunity to be there. Kudos to you for going out volunteering. That is part of what I also want to preach during this podcast, is the fact that you got to be a yes human when you get into university. You got to say yes to your opportunities. You got to maybe say no to the extracurricular parties at times, although I'm still an advocate for going out and having fun. But the more you can get out and take advantage of volunteer opportunities that you're given as a student, the better off you're going to be. Honestly, there will never be a time in your life that you can get access to events, be able to go and have front row seats to these incredible shows when you're a student. There is such a difference. I worked at the NBA All-Star Game, the World Cup of Hockey, the Scotties Tournament of Hearts. All of those opportunities came to fruition because I was given a student volunteer role, and because I put my name out there and said I'd be willing to go and do it, right? And that PWHL draft was incredible. I think it was really well done. The women were awesome. They were excited. They got all fired up, ready to go. There was interest from the media. You have someone like Billie Jean King in attendance, obviously some other high profile individuals who showed up. And, that's what the sport needs. That's what female sport needs, is that attention. And, we went to an LA Angels game, female soccer down in Los Angeles, named Angel City. There we go. And 20,000 plus in attendance, sold out event, but they had, 15 plus high profile celebrities, A-list celebrities in attendance. And like, that's what sports needs, right? And we've had that in men's for years, but that's still a work in progress when it comes to showcasing what the females have out there. And they're putting out, the product's incredible. So there's no reason why people shouldn't be going and attending these games. It's just more attention needs to go towards it. And, slowly but surely that's happening. So it's exciting times to be involved in the industry.
Yeah, for sure. And then we'll move on to the next question here. So for those of you who don't know who are listening, but like David, you kind of made this, like, your outlook and your brand is super big on LinkedIn, and your presence, and you're posting lots of things about what you're doing and different lessons that you've learned. And can you kind of talk about this and how you think that's helped you over the years and helped you create like this brand of who you are?
I've been calling it LinkedIn leverage. Honestly, I have to give a shout out to my grade 10 high school teacher who told us to make a LinkedIn profile. And, I can't even remember his name, unfortunately, but I didn't really think anything of it, had a couple hundred connections, got into university, first year class, sat down as a first year in Dr. Spence's course. And she talked about Brandon Curry, shout out to him, who had already developed a decent LinkedIn profile. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's something I should probably focus on. And throughout university, I did a bit, but I really realized after school and when COVID hit that this is networking and this is building relationships with people. And Charles Kissy at the time was the coach of the men's basketball team. And he mentioned that, networking had like a negative stigma around it, but he really looked at that as just building relationships with people. And I look at LinkedIn now as a way to build relationships with people. And it's a social media platform that I love to be able to have access to and to be able to leverage, frankly, because I'm able to create written content. I'm able to share video content from the podcast, from Cookstart Management, from Expert VR. It's a professional platform that separates maybe the quality of people you're connecting with. There's something to be said for TikTok and Instagram and Twitter because you have other audiences and people have different interests on those platforms. I'm still trying to figure out those ones, if I'm being honest, but I think LinkedIn has really been a key platform for me to be able to hit home on because it satisfies my desire to build those relationships with real people, establish connections, showcase the work that we're doing with the variety of endeavors that I have on the go, and do so in a professional fashion. I've had that kind of lens my whole life, and it's led to maybe not getting as much exposure on places like Instagram and TikTok because I'm, not as, laid back or whatever it is. But LinkedIn has definitely let me kind of open up and showcase what we're doing. And I'm just grateful to be able to have that access to that platform. It's free. If you don't have a LinkedIn, if you're not using it in the professional space, you should be. I think both you, Sierra, Madeline, like if you're not leveraging LinkedIn right now, you definitely should be. And for any students out there who are listening, or for those who have recently graduated, like that's your key to finding a job. That's going to be your key to showcasing what you're doing. You're building out your portfolio. You're leveraging, you're showcasing who you are, what you're doing, what you're capable of doing. And ultimately, the people on LinkedIn are the ones you want to be connecting with, right? Like CEOs, executives, investors. You don't want Joe Schmo from Buffalo on Instagram to be watching your stuff. You want, Phil Knight from Nike watching your stuff, right? Ultimately, you got to go to where those individuals are. And in my opinion, that's LinkedIn.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that point up about Dr. Spence because, I started like my first year of university, I did from home, all online. I lived with my sister, and it was like kind of on my to do list. I was like, well, I'm in university now. Like, I should probably make a LinkedIn page. And then I was in Dr. Spence's class. She did probably the same lecture that she did to you, David. And it was, LinkedIn can be super like helpful, especially if you're in your first year. Like, this is what you should do. So we actually had a project on it, and you had to make a LinkedIn page and like I don't know, do 5 different things and write like a little paper about who you connected with and what did you learn from it and how did you make your profile and all this stuff. And I'm really glad that it was more of like it was integrated into my class, because I feel like then I was more motivated to get it done in the first place. And once I had a little bit of a base, I've just kept adding on to that over the last few years. And every year, you find something different. For example, at the end of this summer, I realized, or I started to utilize the recommendations piece at the bottom because I had seen those before and I knew that you could like write recommendations, but I never really knew how to do it. And my mom was like, well, you should really like get some of those from each of your jobs and different volunteer things you've had so that, if you apply to a job and people click on your post and they see that your boss from this place has written 2 sentences about you or a little paragraph about you, that goes a long way. So there's so many features on there that are super beneficial for students, and I'm a huge advocate for it too. And putting on all your accomplishments or things that you're doing or things that you're interested in. It doesn't always have to be just like I think people think that you only have to put what you're doing for your job on there, or this is where I got hired. I start on Monday. This is where my new job is. This is my new volunteer thing. I started to post books that I'm reading. I started to repost, some cool videos that you see. I think it can be utilized a lot more ways than people think it can be, which is super important.
Absolutely. And like, if you're just posting your job updates, you're going to be doing that once every 6 months max. And if you're doing it more than that, then I've probably got some questions because you're not sticking around your jobs long enough, right? Like, you got to share what you're doing professionally, personally. Some of my best performing content was talking about how appreciative I am for remote work and being able to travel the world here. Like, I'm recording this podcast right now from Tasmania, Australia. And I'm working full time. We're waking up at midnight, working until 8 a.m. And then we go and travel the world from 8 to 4 p.m. here in this time zone. And we go to sleep. And my girlfriend works in a remote job, Phoenix, shout out to her. She runs a digital marketing agency. And between the two of us both having remote work, we're able to travel the world. And I could not be more grateful for that opportunity. And again, that stems from COVID. That stems from putting myself out there online and sharing that I'm willing to work remote and that I'm willing to travel and go do these things. And, we're having conversations with Sydney Swans down here. And now it's literally a global podcast that's impacting people positively. And I think at the end of the day, I owe a lot of that to LinkedIn, as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah. Well, we like to have some fun on the SPEMA Council podcast too. Not that we haven't already, but we like to talk about sports a little bit and some of your most memorable experiences. So I'll throw it over to Alyssa to get that started.
Yeah. Well, actually, just to add quickly, I'm actually in Dr. Spence's class right now. Like, I legitimately have a midterm for her class tomorrow. And I did do that LinkedIn assignment. I actually really enjoyed it. I actually had a lot of fun putting my LinkedIn together and everything. It's like a little social media that like I mean like I run social media for like hockey teams, but it's like a different social media. But I find it so much fun just to like go on there and like see what people are doing. It's honestly super fun. But a
Keep
couple
doing it.
sports
Keep doing it.
questions. So, what was your favorite memory from when you were a Badger?
Yeah, this question I was trying to think about, how I could put my best answer forward because university was probably one of the best times of my life. I came into Brock as an introverted individual, which might be a surprise to some people given the way I was at Brock, but it was really an opportunity for me to come out of my shell. You guys mentioned it. I became a part of Student Administrative Council, SPEMA Council, Senate, BUSU, and I look at back at my time as the student engagement coordinator with BUSU, as an MC for basketball games, for volleyball games, for hockey games. Those were some incredible opportunities and events to be a part of. Steel Blade Classic in front of 5,000 fans. I think, those opportunities and memories are ones that will stick for a lifetime. But in all honesty, it was every aspect of the university experience. I'm so grateful for my time with the sport management community. I think the professors in there are incredible. The, the conversations with Dr. Hyatt in his class and asking questions around, what a Super Bowl 30-second advertisement would be, and me answering the question because it was in a front office sports article and the answer was $5 million. And then 3 months later for that to be on the final exam, like random stuff like that you only get in a tight knit sport management program, was something that I'll remember for a long time. And I, as much as I'd like to say there was one specific moment, one basketball game, one hockey game, it was really the entire experience of going to Brock. I traveled from Vancouver, BC, had never been out to Ontario for more than 5 days. And, that was my first time away from parents. I knew I needed an opportunity to spread my wings, become independent. And the city of St. Catharines, Niagara, was a great place to go to school. Had so much opportunity, things to do, close enough to Toronto that you could travel in by megabus. Probably did that a dozen times in first year. And those were fun memories. And I think there isn't necessarily one in particular that I would shine light on, but just the whole university experience and being in the sport management program is what I would answer that question with.
Yeah, and I think last year we had the men's hockey coach. His name's TJ Manisterski, and he said, you know, he always drove past the 406 exit. There was never really a reason to get off and come on over to St. Catharines and over to where Brock is. But it's a little hidden gem. And over the past few years and continuing with all the stuff that we're getting around here and how the programs are growing, it's a great university and it's really like a hidden gem for students who are applying to university. Sure, we might not be the biggest university, but that's what I love about it. I love that you can walk from end to end in 10 minutes and you don't have to go outside if it's raining, Like it's kind of there it's that perfect size. It's the perfect way to, if you want to get out of your shell and take on opportunities, you can do that. If you kind of want to hide under the radar and that's not really for you, you can do that because it's that perfect size to figure out who you are and do what you like. So I love Brock. It's perfect here. Yeah.
Brock has a
for sure.
fantastic balance, and you hit it. You said it well there, Madeline. Like, if you want to go out, take on new opportunities, you certainly can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But there's opportunities at Brock that are endless, and that's also a testament to the way the program's put together in first year. Like, they do suggest that you go out and volunteer. It's part of the curriculum, right? And you're going to make the most or a little of what you do based on your time and how much you put into it and how many opportunities you say yes to. And I would not be here today if I didn't say yes to as many opportunities as I did as a student at Brock. And I can confidently say that the program itself set us up for success in that sense. And when I say that, like, by no means is the Brock Sport Management program a academically incredibly demanding program. Like, you can talk to some physics students, to some engineering students that have to spend hours every night studying. We frankly did not have to do that. Don't get me wrong, there's nights that I spent up late cramming for tests and making sure I reviewed Dr. Hyatt's notes, but there's opportunities, and you're encouraged to go out and get that professional development outside of school. So I can't stress that enough. Like, if you just waste that time, you're not doing yourself any favors. But if you take advantage of the fact that, hey, this is a balanced program that does give us additional time to go learn externally, and you take advantage of that and you use those opportunities in your favor, man, you're going to be set up for success down the road.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's also like the university just keeps growing. With the Niagara Summer Games, now we have the hockey rink right on campus. It's right here now. You don't have to bus over to the Seymour Hanna Center.
Yeah,
you
how
can
is that?
walk. You can walk from your residence hall. It's awesome. I love that it's right here.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, and like Hockey Canada. No, sorry, Hockey Canada is here, and they did like some of their training and stuff. So like, it's really getting used, and it's easier for students to support as many varsity teams as they can with their free student ticket. So
yeah, go to those games and like
I know.
take advantage of the new facilities, because the zone did not look as nice as it does now. But you guys have an incredible gym that's massive and that isn't being overrun by students. So go and use your free membership that you get access to when you're paying all of your tuition and fees. Like, take advantage of that, because after school, nothing's free and it costs money to do everything and anything. And despite the fact that you're working, in this day and age, in this economy, things get tighter. So enjoy your time as a student, use that meal card up, and yeah, go to those sporting events. The athletes love it. They appreciate it. You're going to be exposed to new opportunities. You're going to make new friends, build relationships. It's very rare, and you will frankly never experience this moment in your life again when you have 20,000 other people that are within 4 or 5 years of yours that are interested in similar things, that have similar ideologies. It never will happen again in your life. So take the most of that as a student. I'm speaking this to you two directly, but for those listening who are students, like, it's a remarkable opportunity, and don't let it slip away, because it goes fast. You mentioned at the beginning, Madeline, it feels like I was graduated recently, but it's almost 5 years now, probably. And, feels like yesterday I remember going through. So it goes quick, and, but there's lots of fun along the way. So if you say yes to those opportunities, you can make it a memorable one.
Yeah, for sure. And then what kind of made you want to join the sport industry? Like, did you grow up or at least like take this SPIMA program? Like, did you grow up playing sports or like being in that realm of things?
Yeah, I played sports growing up my whole life. Hockey and golf in particular were my favorites, or what I was best at. But I played basketball, volleyball, cricket, you name it. I played it at some point, and really knew that I wanted to still be in the sports space in some capacity. Sorry, excuse me. And I honestly found out about the sport management program in early grade 12, late grade 11 from a buddy of mine who mentioned that SPIMA did not require math. And at the time, I was attracted to that because I had solid grades. I had like a 90 average heading into university, but didn't need math. That was attractive at the time. Now you do need math to get into SPIMA. So that stigma of SPIMA math is getting rid slowly but surely. But there was a reason it existed during my time. And I'm so glad I went out on a whim. I didn't even apply to any other universities. It just was the right fit for me. I'd say 75% of the students that came into the program during my year were thanks to Kyle Dubas. We were really that first Kyle Dubas effect. So that was interesting. A lot of Leafs hats. There was only a few of us from Vancouver who came in. We stuck together a bit as a crew. We got lit up because of the Vancouver riots. That was constant conversations around the sporting world and how to handle that as a sport group. But I was like, just knew that was the right fit for me, and never looked back. Once I got into the program, I knew that was where I wanted to be. I fit well. It had a nice balance of academics, athletics, and I knew that for me it was the right fit. And I'm so grateful that I did, because like I said, I've mentioned it a couple of times. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the sport management program.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then I have the last question here. So, who was like your biggest inspiration, either like within the sport industry or just like your personal life?
Yeah, I asked this one on the Athletes podcast all the time too, and I'm realizing it's a tough one to narrow down to just one person. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up my parents, simply for what they provided to me, i.e. life. Like my mom's an empathetic, caring, inspirational individual. She always kind of nurtured me to know that I could take on and do whatever I put my mind to and set out to achieve. And, my dad showcased how I could do that through his hard work, grit, determination. And I owe everything to them for putting me into the position I'm in today. When it comes to like the sport world, I looked at people like, Roberto Luongo was my inspiration as a goalie growing up, to watch him, Carey Price, Martin Brodeur. You guys couldn't tell I was a goalie myself. But I mean, you could list them out. The guys like Roger Federer, Tiger Woods, people like Serena Williams, who just were so dominant in their respective sports and could take on incredible challenges and meet them with seemingly no issues. And then even further, someone like Mark Cuban, who is involved in the sports space now, owns teams. I think that's changed over the years. But I think the consistent aspect for me that stayed the same is like there's pieces of people that I look up to and admire. And, even a guy like Rob Cheevers, who, I didn't even know until second year, but, seeing what he was able to do, the family he has now, 4 kids, like those are things that you don't necessarily have one person that you look at and you're like, oh, I want to be just like them. I take little pieces from every single person and try and add them up and hopefully create a pretty high performing individual myself. And I honestly attribute that to the 200 plus people we've had on the Athletes podcast now, right? Like if I take a little bit, some of the best parts of every person from there, it's at the end of the day, it's going to be a pretty cool culmination of high performance aspects from each of those individuals. So sorry, I can't give you a direct one person answer. And even honestly, someone like Christine Sinclair, who just retired from the sport of soccer, she's someone who I would put up there on that list. Yeah, tough to name just one. So I'm going to give you a bunch and say sorry.
No, well, that's awesome. Well, David, we've had a really good conversation here today about, a lot of different aspects of, the sport industry and Brock and your professional life and all the things that you've been up to. And we really appreciate that. But we like to give our guests the final word and give you the floor before we close it up. So, on behalf of Alyssa and I, we thank you for joining us here today. And the floor is yours. Anything you want to finish up with for whoever's listening or for Brock students, that's up to you.
Cool. Well, first off, thank you guys so much for putting this together, for continuing it on. I mentioned it, but Will Ord for starting this podcast, and for everyone within the SPEMA department who I didn't mention, people like Chris Chard, those individuals who were integral pieces for us going up as young adults, entering into the sport management program. I'd say if you're interested in learning more about health, fitness, wellness, check out the Athletes podcast. If you would like to connect with me, do so on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm most active. If you are wanting to work in the sports space, please feel free to reach out. If I don't have an opportunity within Cookstark Management, LDC Talent, the Athletes podcast, we have our first intern, Thomas Morgan. Shout out to him, who's been incredible, as well as Tyson Shilley, who's working with Cookstark Management. Those two individuals have been phenomenal to work with so far. Excited to be able to continue to offer more internships, bring in the sport management student experience to what we have to offer. If you have a first responder in your family, check out Expert BR and the work we're doing there. And more than anything, thank you too for having me on, Kendra, for reaching out. And it's cool to see the SPEMA program continuing to flourish, and proud Badger as always. And appreciate both your time. Hope everyone enjoyed listening. If you didn't, sorry for wasting your time. And we'll see you next time. On the reunion or whatever the next episode is.
Oh yeah. Thanks, David.
Awesome.